Selene Ashford woke in the tiny attic room, the soft morning light filtering through the frosted glass window. On the wall hung a photograph of her and her mother from the days they still lived together under the same warm roof, her mother's gentle smile soothing her heart each time she glanced at it. The quiet space was broken only by the ticking of the clock on the desk and the faint scent of green tea lingering in the half-finished cup. Selene sighed, pulled the blanket up to her chest, and felt the warmth had already cooled. She knew she had to get up and face the new day with the challenges that awaited her, even if a twinge of sadness still lingered in her heart. The longing for her mother always seeped into every moment, especially when she brushed her hair before the mirror, her hand trembling from the tears shed the night before. Her mother had died when she was only 11, leaving Selene alone in a family that did not acknowledge her existence. Her stepfather, Damien Blackwell, always treated her as an unwanted guest. His two biological children, Seraphina and Thaddeus, each day found new ways to smear and bully her. They mocked her as the illegitimate child, belittling her for having no power and no real love in this household. Selene endured it all in silence, carrying her pain with her each day. The pale sunlight fell upon the neatly hung black and blue uniform on the stand. Selene took down her blouse and slipped it on slowly. She imagined her reflection in class, the gentle waves of her long hair draped over her shoulders, her bright, intelligent eyes hiding a profound loneliness. Before leaving the room, she leaned over her desk and lightly touched the stack of notebooks filled with formulas and essay lines, for they were the only place she felt safe. Each character, each lesson, was a support keeping her heart from shattering. On the uneven brick path leading to the front door, Selene carefully avoided the shards of broken pottery from the flower pot Thaddeus had smashed. She pressed her lips together and reminded herself to stay calm. Today was crucial for her, the school-wide debate competition, and Selene was one of the leading contenders. Her academic excellence had only intensified the Blackwell step-siblings' relentless attacks. But if she gave in, she would sacrifice her dream of inspiring children like her, orphaned, underprivileged, yet still believing that the light of knowledge could banish darkness. In the kitchen, Damien sat leisurely reading the newspaper, not bothering to look up as Selene quietly poured him a glass of warm milk. He didn't speak a word, merely nodding to complete the ritual. Seraphina entered with a mocking half-smile. "Nervous, are you? A school-wide debate sounds impressive, doesn't it? What if you stumble over a sentence and everyone laughs?" Selene remained silent, sipping her milk, feeling as if a blade were slicing through her ears. She left the kitchen before Seraphina could continue her taunting and stepped out of the house, leaving behind a look of contempt. In the gray taxi slowly making its way through the suburban streets, Selene leaned back in her seat, trying to quiet the jumbled thoughts in her head. She closed her eyes, determined to focus on her speech, stories of perseverance, inner strength, and the journey of overcoming loss. The gentle hum of the engine was like a background melody, but her heart still raced. She held her debate notebook, flipping through the pages and silently rehearsing each passage until every word felt sure. With each step closer to the gates of Crestmont Academy, her heart pounded faster. This prestigious school was not only a place of learning but also her battlefield. Honor rolls lined the halls, listing outstanding students, and Selene Ashford's name had held the top spot for 2 consecutive years. But that achievement brought her no real joy. It only gave the Blackwell siblings more ammunition for their bullying. In the large auditorium, the principal's gaze swept over the stack of names before it landed on Selene. In his warm, deep voice, he said, "Miss Ashford, please prepare for your debate." Selene nodded, her movement calm but her heart about to leap from her chest. She stood and stepped onto the podium, her mind filled with mingled confidence and fear. All eyes turned to her, some filled with admiration, some with envy, others with curiosity. Selene took a deep breath and began to speak into the microphone. Her voice rang out clear and coherent, each idea like a refreshing stream soothing the tension in the room. When she finished, the hall seemed to hold its breath for a moment before exploding into applause. Selene bowed her head in thanks, her small shoulders curving into a smile, her eyes shining with happiness. Yet deep inside, she knew this moment was fleeting. Once she returned home, she would face disdainful glances and harsh remarks again. Nevertheless, Selene felt a surge of pride in herself. She had conquered her fear and her insecurities to shine before others. After classes, Selene quietly returned to the furthest corner of the library and opened her books to review. The late afternoon sun tapped softly against the windowpane, casting a warm beam across the pages. She read each line intently, yet Serafina's mocking laughter echoed in her mind. She gripped her pen tightly, telling herself to be strong and to protect her passion. Footsteps sounded down the hallway, but Selene did not look up. Her heart was waiting for something different, someone who would see not just her achievements but also understand her loneliness, her pain, and her aspirations. Returning home, Selene walked across the dim courtyard where the smell of exhaust and wildflowers mingled in the air. She opened the door, and the hallway's faint light fell on her tired eyes. Serafina and Thaddeus leaned against the railing, exchanging challenging glances. A lump formed in her chest, but she held herself steady, passed by them, and entered the silent corridor. She knocked on her door, made sure everything was as she left it, and then quietly closed it behind her. Night fell, and Selene sat at her desk under the warm yellow lamp, reopening the journal she had long left unfinished. She wrote about her worries and disappointments, but also about hope and her dream of building a solid future through knowledge. Tears rolled down her cheeks, yet she smiled softly. Each drop was proof of her effort. She closed the notebook, closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and fell asleep with the thought, tomorrow, she would continue fighting, until she found the real light for her life. The morning at Crestmont Academy began with the regular chime of the bell echoing across the spacious campus, where the aged maple trees cast broad shadows and gently dropped their leaves onto the stone-paved paths. Cassian Vale stepped out from the red-roofed Vale family mansion with his glossy leather satchel, his demeanor calm but his gaze distant. From the outside, the neoclassical grandeur of the mansion displayed the full prestige and power of the Vale lineage, but to Cassian it was merely a cold backdrop, a place where he felt bound by invisible expectations. His mother had died when he was young, and his father, Gregory Vale, was a successful businessman always busy working abroad. Since taking Cassian in, Elaine Vale had placed immense emphasis on his academic performance, viewing it as the sure path to secure the family's future. Cassian's most vivid memory of his mother was her sitting beside his desk, gently brushing his long hair off his forehead and softly saying, "You're very smart, don't waste your abilities." Those words resonated in his heart whenever anyone doubted his capabilities or accused him of living carelessly. Today was no different. He entered the campus with a more relaxed stride than usual, but his eyes never stopped scanning his surroundings. The bustling throng of students, the sounds of laughter and chatter, and the rhythmic turning of book pages blended into a familiar symphony of youth. Cassian headed straight for Class 12A, where he was both an elite student and one of the school's most notorious troublemakers. Rumor had it he had skipped classes multiple times to settle a fight with rival gangs or raced his electric bike at reckless speeds, only to land himself in needless trouble. Yet it was also he who had won the provincial math competition and consistently secured first place in school-wide academic contests. He entered the classroom wearing a confident half-smile, prompting a few classmates to steal glances. Soft morning music played over the class speakers, but the blackboard at the front still waited for the first lecture of the period by the philosophy teacher, Mrs. Meredith Stanton. She walked in with a gentle smile, and as she began to lecture on the concept of social justice, Cassian diligently took notes in neat, precise handwriting. Occasionally he looked up at the board, his eyes full of passion, the look usually seen on dedicated students, not the rebel he was rumored to be. In that moment, he felt a sense of relief as he immersed himself in theory, weighing each idea and questioning why people must fight for justice, why they must believe in freedom. In Cassian's mind, knowledge was the key that unlocked the door to broad understanding, yet life outside the classroom was full of confusion and chaos. He wondered whether he could balance those two seemingly opposing worlds. During the mid-morning break, Cassian and a few close friends walked down the long hallway toward the library. He loved the quiet ambience of towering wooden bookshelves and the warm beams of light streaming through arched windows onto the reading tables. He set his backpack on a chair, opened his laptop, and quietly accessed his research notes for his literature topic. Then he heard a faint sound that made him look up, soft footsteps and the careful arrangement of books. He tilted his head to listen but saw no one nearby. He felt an unusual energy, as if someone were watching him. He furrowed his brow but saw only a few classmates whispering in small groups. He took a deep breath and shook his head, dismissing it as a trick of focus. Then, through the small glass partition dividing the reading room, he caught sight of long, dark brown hair and a straight posture, fully absorbed in her books. The light on her serious face gave her a serene beauty that stood in stark contrast to the noisy surroundings. He was momentarily startled to recognize her as Selene Ashford, the student who had topped the honor roll and delivered a stellar speech just yesterday morning. Cassian didn't know when he had become so drawn to that image. He had met her a few times, yet never paused to observe her like this. Perhaps in her focused gaze, he saw a kinship, a longing for a firm anchor amid chaos. He stifled the urge to walk over and say hello, reminding himself to maintain his distance. His reputation and rebellious nature might drive her away, and he wasn't ready to face rejection. The final period was PE on the grass field, where Cassian often got carried away kicking the ball and unleashing his boundless energy. Today he threw the ball with all his strength and sprinted with fierce momentum, hoping to banish his restlessness. Amid the laughter and cheers of his friends, he felt free, as if returning to his wild instincts. Yet whenever he closed his eyes in bliss, the image of Selene, her sweat-drenched face and resolute eyes, flashed before him, unsettling his heart in an unfamiliar way. After school, Cassian walked through the gate toward the scooter garage under the old birch tree. The sun had set, leaving only the faint glow of dusk. He unlocked his blue Vespa, the one his mother had given him for his birthday, settled onto the seat, and eased on the throttle. The sweet scent of gasoline mingled with the evening fragrance of grass and flowers as it rushed past his ears. Leaning his head back against the seat, he tried to quiet his tangled thoughts. He still didn't understand why he suddenly felt the urge to protect Selene, to see her safe, to hear that gentle laugh echo in his chaotic world. On the way home, streetlights cast silver ribbons of light across the plankstone road. Cassian rode through the working-class neighborhood of modest houses set close together. Remembering Selene in the taxi that morning, his heart stirred with empathy, imagining her returning home to Serafina and Thaddeus's scornful glances and Damien's coldness. He wondered if he could change that situation, to protect that small member of the bastard family. Back at the mansion, Cassian climbed the long wooden staircase to the second floor, where his bedroom and study lay. His room was austere in muted tones, with a desk under a large window overlooking the garden and bookshelves overflowing with philosophy, economics, and classic novels. He placed his helmet on the rack, removed his leather gloves, and sat at his desk beneath the study lamp. His laptop still displayed his philosophy assignment file, but he closed it and looked out the window. The slender crescent moon peeked through the trees, casting just enough light to silhouette the swaying leaves. Cassian sighed, lifted his pen, and opened his notebook, where he recorded personal reflections known to few. He wrote of the emptiness he felt despite admiration from many, of his longing for purpose not measured solely by achievement but by connection with others. He wrote about Selene Ashford, the girl who made him want to become a better version of himself, to learn how to listen, to learn how to love. The ink smudged in places, as if he was unaccustomed to expressing his emotions in words. As night deepened, Cassian closed his notebook and turned off the light. Before drifting off, he imagined rushing to the library tomorrow, finding a way to sit near Selene, lending her books to help with her studies, or simply offering a friendly greeting. He wasn't sure if she would accept, but he knew he would not give up. In his heart, a spark kindled, the flame of genuine feeling, of the desire to protect. And from that moment, the journeys of two seemingly parallel lives began to intersect. The bell signaling break rang throughout the corridors of Crestmont Academy, where students poured out into the courtyard, chatting and laughing. Selene Ashford huddled in the corner of the staircase near the library, clutching the debate notebook she had just presented. She didn't want to engage with anyone, her eyes fixed on the steps. At the last moment, Seraphina Blackwell appeared, her blonde ponytail swaying behind her as she hurried over, a cold smile spreading across her lips and her hand poised to snatch the notebook from Selene. Selene's breath caught, her heart pounding faster. She tried to hold on to the notebook, her shoulders shook with fear. The steady footsteps of Thaddeus Blackwell followed his sisters, his eyes gleaming with delight. They always found pleasure in making her life difficult, pushing her into vulnerable positions. This time, Seraphina gave a hard tug, the notebook fell to the floor, its pages scattering across the stairs. Selene bent to pick up each sheet, fighting back tears as mocking laughter rang in her ears. Seraphina reached down, grabbed the notebook, and flung it into a nearby trash bin. She bared her teeth in a satisfied grin. Thaddeus laughed triumphantly and shoved Selene, sending her tumbling to the edge of the staircase. No one around moved to help, all gazes passed by indifferently. Selene forced down her humiliation, stooped to retrieve the dirt-smudged pages with trembling hands. She knew she could not cry out, her stepfather would scold her for being weak, reminding her that she was born to endure. Just then, a figure appeared before the Blackwell siblings. Cassian Vale, his black leather jacket casually slung over his shoulders, stepped forward with a cool yet resolute air. His gaze skimmed Seraphina and paused on Thaddeus. His breathing was calm and his tall frame stood like a protective shield. In an instant, the charged tension around them seemed to crack. Cassian's voice rang out, "That's enough." Seraphina froze, her smug expression shifting to one of challenge. "This is her business. Why are you interfering?" Cassian frowned but said nothing. Instead, he tilted his chin toward the fallen notebook and silently signaled for them to help Selene. Thaddeus sneered, "Vale, don't think you can swoop in and boss us around." His tone was icy, but Cassian remained unmoved. He set his satchel on the floor, slowly unclenched his fists, and said, "If you have questions, ask Selene directly. And you too, stay away from other people's things." Cassian's footsteps echoed as he strode forward, swiftly positioning himself between Seraphina and Selene. Selene froze, looking up at him in astonishment. In that moment, her heart raced at the sight of someone, of all people, the school's notorious troublemaker, standing up for her. Cassian bent down, his serious face close to hers, and with a warm, steady voice asked, "Are you all right?" Selene's fingers trembled, she nodded slightly. Gratitude and a flicker of pride welled up inside her, though she would never admit it. Cassian straightened and turned back to the Blackwells, his tone colder, "From now on, don't you ever touch her again." His gaze was intense, his authority undeniable, and Seraphina and Thaddeus recoiled. After a moment's hesitation, they slunk away, leaving Selene alone on the stairs. Once they had disappeared, Cassian hurried to fish the notebook out of the trash and handed it back to Selene. Dust clung to the pages. He brushed them off with his fingertips and smoothed each sheet before saying, lightly but firmly, "I told them this was the most important notebook in the school. No one should touch it." Selene blinked, accepting the notebook, warmth spreading through her chest. She managed a shy smile and began to speak, "Thank you, but you." Cassian tilted his head, offering his half-smile, "Don't mention it. I just didn't want anyone to hurt you." Selene swallowed hard, the sensation of her heart being squeezed. She had no words, simply nodded, tucked the notebook under her arm, and slipped toward the library. Before entering, she looked back at Cassian, her eyes shining with gratitude and something unnamed. He met her gaze for a moment, then turned and walked down a different corridor. Inside the cozy library, Selene settled at her usual table, placed her debate notebook face up, unwilling to hug it to her chest as she normally would. She felt a wave of vulnerability, she had grown so accustomed to loneliness. The insecurity of being the stepchild resurfaced. Yet now she realized she was not entirely powerless, someone genuinely cared and wanted to protect her. The thought sent a shiver through her, partly excitement, partly confusion. She opened her notebook to begin studying, though her mind kept drifting to Cassian's commanding presence and warm eyes watching over her. Meanwhile, Cassian stood outside the library door, listening in contemplation. He wondered why his thoughts kept returning to Selene Ashford, why he felt unsettled seeing her upset. He, who valued freedom and avoided deep attachments, now wanted to do everything in his power so she would never suffer again. The realization both frightened and compelled him. He turned and walked down the hallway toward the math lab, where he and some classmates had arranged a study session. In the quiet lab, rows of desks held computers, and graph-lined whiteboards hung on the walls. Cassian sat at a workstation, opened his problem set file, but his eyes kept drifting to the campus beyond the window. Selene's words echoed in his mind, "Thank you." He wondered if there was more she wanted to say. The anticipation made him restless. He roughly jotted notes on the board, then erased them, as if seeking the right words for himself. Late that afternoon, Cassian turned to his friend and said, "Let's study together in the library tonight." His friend looked surprised but agreed. Cassian knew the library was where Selene often stayed until closing time. He planned to approach her, to find a chance to talk, though a flicker of fear remained, fear of rejection, fear that she wouldn't want to interact. He took a deep breath and resolved to try. Under the warm golden lights of Crestmont's corridors that evening, Cassian Vale hurried toward the library before it closed. The courtyard was now nearly empty, footsteps echoing in the still air. He could smell the night breeze mingled with autumn leaves. His heart pounded and his breath came in ragged bursts, not only from his run, but from the pull drawing him toward Selene Ashford, the girl who seemed so out of place in his chaotic world, yet whom he most wanted to protect. The Crestmont Academy library at night carried an unusual quiet. Warm yellow light streamed through the arched windows, illuminating tiny dust motes floating in the air. Cassian Vale stepped inside, giving his leather jacket a slight tug, willing himself to be braver. He looked around, long wooden tables neatly aligned, chairs pushed in, and towering bookshelves exuding the scent of ink and worn covers. In the far corner, Selene Ashford sat alone, bent over a volume of classic romantic literature. Her hair cascaded like a silken rug, and her eyes brightened as they accidentally met an ancient verse. Cassian drew a deep breath, stifling his quickened pulse. He approached, striving for calm though his heart pounded. Selene looked up, surprise and shyness flickering across her face. Her long lashes fluttered, easing all tension. Cassian offered a gentle smile. "I came looking for you," he said, his voice low and warm. Selene parted her lips, but no words came, her heart rattled, yet she forced herself to remain composed. Awkwardly, Cassian set his satchel on the table beside her, spreading his hands. "I want to borrow this book." Ordinary words, but to Selene they sounded earnest and sincere. She nodded, rose, and fetched a green-covered 19th-century literature volume from the nearby shelf. "Is this the one you need?" she asked softly. Cassian studied the book and nodded. "Yes." "You're reading it?" She smiled lightly. "I was just reviewing the passage you mentioned in your presentation." At that moment, Cassian remembered, Selene had quoted this very book in her speech yesterday. The sudden bond warmed him. Golden lamplight cascaded across the table, illuminating its surface. Selene leaned over the table and pointed to a line, "This passage speaks of the longing for freedom, of the journey to find oneself." Cassian bent forward to read, his brow furrowing before his eyes lit up with fascination. Selene's chest swelled with tender joy, the first time someone had truly cared about the work she loved. She spoke quietly, "If you'd like, I can lend you more related volumes." Cassian looked at her sincerely. "I'd appreciate that." They sat side by side, taking out notebooks to jot down observations. Each sentence, each illustration was discussed with fervor. Cassian pointed to a romantic poem and recounted memories of his mother, who had taught him to feel beauty in literature. Selene listened, her eyes moist, gently touching the page as if caressing her own memories. She spoke of her mother, the gentle woman who had left this world when Selene was too young to remember. Her voice wavered as she tried to hide her emotion. Cassian watched, understanding her effort to stay strong. Then he reached out and took Selene's hand, gently stroking her knuckles. "You're not alone." Selene's heart fluttered at his words. The clock's ticking echoed in the hush. She closed her eyes, savoring the warmth of his hand. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Selene whispered, "Thank you," so softly only Cassian could hear. At that moment, a shadow darted past the library door, breaking the spell. Cassian withdrew his hand and masked his calm. "I was worried my cousin might misplace the book," he lied. Selene chuckled softly, her heart once again alight with happiness. They returned to studying, this time diving into ancient Roman philosophy. Cassian asked why Selene studied so broadly. She replied that literature and philosophy gave her purpose and steeled her against her family's storms. When the clock struck 11, the librarian's gentle voice reminded them, "Please turn off the lights, we're closing soon." Cassian stood, smoothing his shirt, and turned to Selene. "I'll walk you home." Selene's cheeks flushed. "See, could I go with you?" Cassian smiled. "I didn't want you to walk alone." His simple reassurance brought tears to her eyes. She nodded. They switched off lamps and tidied their books. Cassian slung his satchel over his shoulder and walked beside Selene under the archway where streetlights painted soft pools of light. Outside was silent except for rustling leaves. Selene walked tentatively, casting glances at Cassian, steady and warm by her side. She saw his smile by lamplight, his eyes shining with genuine joy. On the courtyard, Cassian took Selene's hand and led her to the side gate, where a familiar taxi waited. The driver nodded in greeting but said nothing. Selene hesitated before sliding into the back seat, her gaze shyly finding Cassian. He approached the taxi window and leaned in. "Could you drive a bit slower?" "She's used to this route." The driver nodded and started the engine. Cassian looked at Selene for a moment, then hopped into the front passenger seat. Along the empty road, streetlights formed a string of glowing pearls. Selene gazed out the window, feeling an unusual peace. She thought of Cassian, who had made sure she got home safely, never letting her be alone in the night. She wondered what to call this feeling, but the warmth inside made her reluctant to label it. The taxi turned onto the brick lane leading to her old family mansion, its iron gate mottled with moss and the garden's blooms long withered. When they arrived, Selene stepped out and bowed to thank the driver. He nodded and reminded her, "Remember to lock up securely." She smiled and turned toward the gate, her slender frame moving into the darkness. Then a voice called, "Selene." She looked back to see Cassian still seated in the taxi, concern in his eyes. She forced a smile and waved. "Thank you," she mouthed. Cassian returned a firm nod, and the taxi pulled away. Selene stood in the deserted lane, her heart fluttering. Though she knew her family waited inside and pictured Serafina and Thaddeus mocking her, she felt a spark of hope. She walked home under the pale moonlight, a gentle smile on her lips. In her heart, a new beginning was stirring, the start of a bond between two souls who, though different, both longed to be understood and protected. Selene stepped through the chipped wooden gate, her legs still trembling from the security she'd felt with Cassian's escort. The sultry June night air retained the day's heat in the garden corners. She inhaled deeply, catching a whiff of jasmine on the breeze, trying to banish her constant anxiety. Beyond the sturdy door awaited hallways lit by flickering fluorescent lights and walls yellowed with age, where Serafina and Thaddeus had been lurking for who knew how long. Selene's foot lifted onto the first step when a peculiar clattering stopped her. She froze, her hand trembling as she gripped her sleeve, scanning the darkness. In an instant, Thaddeus appeared behind her and yanked her arm, whispering with a cruel grin, "Back late tonight?" Looking to be punished? Selene gasped, her heart racing as she tried to pull away, but Thaddeus's grip was iron tight. When she turned, Serafina was there too, her eyes glittering with challenge. Serafina laughed, tossing her blonde hair. Feeling high on your debate victory, escorted home by your boyfriend, huh? Selene closed her eyes and took a steadying breath, refusing to cry out. She knew that if she called for help, she'd only be blamed for disturbing the family. No one would come to her aid. Serafina snapped her fingers, signaling Thaddeus to lock the back door. The bolt slid home with a harsh clang, sealing every escape route. Selene turned, her heart shattering. You can't, she stammered, but only earned Serafina's mocking smile and Thaddeus's indifferent sneer. Without warning, Serafina snatched Selene's phone from her pocket and flung it into a dark corner. Thaddeus slammed shut the drawer holding the keys. Selene lunged for the door latch but was too weak. She screamed, knees buckling, tears streaming down her face. Let me go. You monsters. But her plea only deepened the silence, met with their cruel laughter. Overwhelmed, Selene sank to the cold tile floor, curling around a nearby cloth-covered chair pillow, trying to steady her trembling. Every sense was on edge. She heard her own ragged breathing, smelled the faint scent of gas mixed with shampoo in her hair, and the metallic click of the stove's valve. Serafina checked the gas line beneath the kitchen counter, then whispered as she cracked the valve, "You're in for a surprise fireworks show." Thaddeus watched, a cruel glint in his eye. "Don't expect anyone to come save you," he taunted, shoving Selene to the floor. Tears welled as Selene pressed her face into the pillow, mind racing. Why did they hate her so much? She'd never hurt anyone, she only tried to excel at her studies to survive in this cold household. Suddenly, the gas hissed louder, suffusing the room with its acrid odor. Selene gasped for breath, dizziness washing over her. She scrambled for her phone, but Serafina had thrown it too far. Drifting in the haze, Selene remembered Cassian's promise, "You're not alone." The words echoed in her mind, stirring a flicker of hope. Was he waiting for her in the library right now? Had he noticed her absence? She tried to call his name, her throat raw, but the choking gas stifled her. She hugged the pillow, closed her eyes, preparing herself for the encroaching darkness, clinging to the faintest hope of rescue. Outside, Serafina and Thaddeus folded their arms in triumph, heading back to their rooms to celebrate their twisted prank, unaware that someone had spotted smoke rising from Selene's house. Thaddeus caught sight of a distant, faint beeping from a smoke alarm down the hallway. Panic jolted through them as they raced back to the kitchen. Garden floodlights flickered on, illuminating the haze. They froze, the gravity of what they'd done sinking in. "Sis. I called for help," Thaddeus stammered, grabbing Serafina's hand. Serafina's lips trembled as she yanked her hair back, her face pale. They realized their joke had gone too far. Inside, Selene smelled burning, then a thick cloud of smoke enveloped the room. She lost consciousness, alone in suffocating darkness. Outside, fire engines wailed as flashing lights bathed the front yard in red and orange. No one noticed the living room curtain stir, then a tall figure pressed close to the window. In his eyes glimmered both anxiety and resolve. Cassian Vale had learned Selene was missing, come to her home, and was now ready to charge into the flames to fulfill his promise of protection. Blinding floodlights from fire hoses tore through the smoke. Cassian did not hesitate, he brushed off ash from his jacket and plunged into the roaring blaze. The heat seared his skin, but he paid no mind, his heart raced for only one person, Selene. His eyes stung, tears mingling with soot on his stricken face as he called out, "Selene." He kicked aside a fallen board barring the kitchen door. Inside, black smoke swirled and the gas hiss continued. He hurtled forward, using his shoulder to shove the cabinet aside as flames danced along the brick walls. His heart lurched when he saw Selene collapsed on the floor, her hair streaked with ash and her face ashen from smoke inhalation. Cassian knelt beside her, hands trembling as he scooped her frail body into his arms. Selene's breath was shallow, her eyes shut like a flower about to wither. Cassian pressed his face against hers, voice hoarse, "Wake up. I'm here." He carefully rose, carrying her step by step toward the exit as the inferno threatened to consume the kitchen. Embers twirled overhead, the heat scorching his skin. At last, he emerged. Firefighters held him back at a safe distance, and a medic thrust an emergency oxygen mask into his hand. He braced himself on the stoop, cradling Selene. His face already reddened and blistered, his nose burned, and his mouth tasted of smoke. He drew deep on the oxygen mask, determined to banish any pain that might distract him from calling her name. Paramedics hurried Selene away on a stretcher, their siren-wailing ambulance door yanking closed. Cassian staggered to his feet and yanked it open again. "Wait, she needs me, let me go with her," he gasped. A young doctor placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You can't, too dangerous." Cassian tried to argue, but his glassy eyes grew empty. He sank to the pavement, arms wrapped around his knees, his body trembling. That night in the city hospital, 2 adjacent emergency rooms held them. In the right room lay Selene. Whenever she stirred, she flickered her eyes open only to pass out again. The ICU's cold hum and blinking lights surrounded her, the respirator's rhythmic hiss her only company. In the left room lay Cassian, unconscious after his lungs and body were overwhelmed by smoke and burns. His skin was charred where flames had touched him, his right cheek blistered, one eye swollen shut beneath heavy bandages that left only his nose and mouth visible. Burns on his airway worried the doctors about possible voice loss. The Vale family was summoned immediately. Gregory and Elaine Vale arrived in the early dawn hallway. Gregory stood before his bandaged son, eyes betraying helplessness. Elaine, dazed, approached and gripped Cassian's hand. Her voice cracked, "My son, why were you so foolish? All for a girl. You know this will cost you dearly." Even cold Gregory could not mask his worry. "Elaine, we can't let him continue like this. We've paid for plastic surgery and expensive meds. If he digs deeper, our family's reputation will suffer." Their words drifted through the glass partitions. Cassian, though unconscious, heard them. In his fevered haze, their reproaches lashed at him like whips. He faintly saw Selene in the next room. She cracked her eyes open and looked at him with a spectral gaze. She wanted to call his name, but the transparent barrier kept her unreachable. Tears welled in her eyes as she weakly pressed her hand against the glass, as if trying to pierce the invisible wall to be by his side. In the hallway, Damien Blackwell, Selene's stepfather, also received news. He brushed dust off a living room chair in the mansion and forced a bitter smile. At last, the stepdaughter got someone's attention. But at what cost? Born here, she was a debt to this family. Let a fire teach her a lesson, maybe then she'll know her place. Those words echoed in Selene's mind when she awoke the next morning. She blinked groggily to the antiseptic scent of the ward. Attempting to sit, pain shot through her body. A nurse hurried in, gentle. "You're awake, Selene? You were saved. The doctor says you inhaled smoke and need oxygen. Don't try to sit up, rest as much as you can." Selene blinked, struggling to piece together last night's events, but her memories felt like a fading nightmare. Blood trickled at her lips' corner, her face was bruised. She looked around, startled to find Cassian gone. Her chest tightened. She closed her eyes, recalling his swollen eyes and broken voice, "You're not alone." She silently pleaded, "Please don't leave me." Instead of his presence, she heard a voice by her side, "You shouldn't see him again." Damien Blackwell stood there, his tall shadow cast on the ward glass, eyes cold. Selene turned away in silence, tears slipping down her cheeks. She realized her cruel stepfather had intruded even here. All hope of her protector seemed to vanish. She tried to wipe her tears, but a throat ache stopped her. The nurse rushed back and supported her. Don't strain yourself. You'll recover soon. Selene squeezed her eyes shut, lonely and wounded. She missed his shoulder, his comforting whisper. She wondered whether to seek him out, to demand an explanation, to ask, "Why did you leave me?" But she knew the barrier between them was no longer shyness, it was her family's decision. 2 weeks later, Cassian was discharged, his face concealed by elaborate bandages. The doctor warned him he'd need facial reconstructive surgery and over a year of healing. The Vale family arranged for him to leave the country the next day, combining study abroad with medical treatment. Elaine embraced him, tears streaming. "Stay there and forget about her. Don't come back or we will." Elaine's voice trailed off. Cassian simply nodded, his gaze distant as he looked out the window, where Selene stood under the bare peach tree. She waved softly, but he turned away. The airplane's roar shattered the gray sky as Cassian flew away, leaving Crestmont, and his heart shattered. Beyond the ward window, Selene hugged a pillow in the dim afternoon light, tears falling as her newly healed hope crumbled. She did not know what the future held, only one thing was certain: she would not let him slip away again. No matter how much he changed or hid his face, she would find him and say the three simple yet weighty words once more: "I need you." Selene awoke in the silent hospital room, the steady hiss of the ventilator beating in place of her own heart. Early autumn sunlight slanted through the small window, tracing shifting patterns on the wall and pulling her back to a painful reality. In recent days she'd lived in despair, aching for Cassian so fiercely she could not sleep, afraid that her dreams would return her to the moment he lay motionless beside her, half-closed eyes and lips pale as a wilted flower. She wondered, had he forgotten her? Had that new face made him unable to look back? When the nurse came to check her oxygen, Selene clutched the edge of her gown and croaked, I want to be discharged early." The nurse shook her head gently. "The doctor hasn't cleared you yet. You need more rest." Selene let go, tears flooding, not from pain, but from feeling trapped. She remembered Cassian's anxious eyes as he protected her, his warm hand soothing her. She blamed herself for not being strong enough to spare him this sacrifice. Over the following days, Selene began to plan her future. Though her stepfather protested and Serafina and Thaddeus continued to visit the hospital with taunting sneers, she no longer felt fear. She opened her laptop and navigated to Oxford University's website, where Cassian might be studying abroad. She researched scholarship programs, pored over each entry requirement, and drafted an application essay describing her journey through family tragedy and her longing to heal pain through knowledge. Each night she stayed up late, polishing every line until not a single error remained. Burning inside her was one conviction: if she could reach him wherever he was, even if his face had changed, she would still recognize him by his voice, by the way he comforted her, by the tender breath that soothed her in her nightmares. The Blackwells pressed her relentlessly until the day she was discharged. Damien declared he would fund no overseas study. Serafina sneered, "Oxford? What a pipe dream." But Selene said nothing, swallowing her bitterness as she secretly put down a deposit for a wheelchair and used her late mother's tiny land title deed as collateral. She knew this was a gamble for survival, risking her only family asset for a chance to change her destiny. Each time she signed the papers, fear shivered through her, but she saw Cassian's face in her mind, urging her onward. Finally, after almost a month of preparation, she received preliminary news. Her scholarship application had been approved, and she was invited to an online interview with the admissions panel. The night before the interview, she pressed the photo of her and Cassian from the library to her lips and whispered, "I'm coming to find you. I need you." The words echoed in the empty room, a vow unbreakable. Meanwhile, in distant London, Cassian Vale awoke from his facial reconstruction surgery. He blinked against the harsh white lights, his new skin tight and swollen around bandages on his forehead, cheeks, and chin. Only his left eye, puffy and bruised, was visible, along with a raw wound by his ear. For the first time in 8 years, he did not recognize the face in the mirror. When a nurse placed a small hand mirror before him, he recoiled as if confronted by a stranger. His heart clenched, Selene's image in his memory drifted farther away. The Vale family had arranged everything: study abroad documents, accommodation, visa procedures, connections with London's top plastic surgeon. His parents sighed in relief. "At last you can forget her," they said. But deep inside, Cassian could not. He lay motionless, his hand ghosting over a pillow tossed into the hallway, as if searching for Selene's shape. He remembered her hand like a cool breeze on a summer night, her gentle laugh when she spoke of books. Though his new face might fool everyone else, he would still feel that warmth of being loved and protected. He gripped the sheets, hot tears mingling with the bandages. In the early days of recovery, Cassian practiced speaking into the ventilator's hiss. "Are you okay?" "I'm here." His voice came out hoarse and broken. He wrote every phrase he longed to say to Selene in a notebook: "You're not alone." In the hospital corridor he met Lynn, a young Vietnamese nurse, kind and patient. Lynn became his vocal coach, guiding each syllable and breath. "Keep speaking," she urged. "They'll recognize your voice." Cassian looked at her in silence, finding a spark of hope. Weeks of healing in England made Cassian long for home. Each black tea on his windowsill, each half-read philosophy text reminded him of Selene and their afternoons in the library. He began blogging under the pen name V, chronicling his journey of restoration and the realization that his true self remained inside despite losing his old face. His honest posts quickly found an audience. One day, Selene stumbled across a few lines and her heart raced at the familiar tone, reminding her of Cassian. She quietly bookmarked the blog but dared not reach out. Selene's scholarship interview came and went in a whirl of nerves. She spoke fluent English about her dream of using knowledge to heal trauma, citing her own story and Cassian's as proof. The panel scribbled notes with serious expressions. She closed with, "I believe that though our faces may change, our soul and ideals remain unchanged." Silence fell, then applause broke out. Selene wept with relief, as if she had climbed to a summit. A week later, the official offer arrived. Hands trembling, she opened the envelope bearing her name. In her mind's eye she saw Cassian's shy smile as he brushed hair from her forehead and whispered, "You're not alone." She decided to leave. Her tearful farewell with her longtime Vietnamese housekeeper felt like a second mother. "Live for yourself, but don't forget me," she cried. Selene promised she would return, and above all, find Cassian, the one who had sacrificed everything for her. On departure day at Hanoi's airport, light rain fell. Selene walked slowly through the gate, her suitcase in hand, her heart aching. In the distance Serafina and Thaddeus stood with feigned sorrow, watching her go as if watching a victor. Damien Blackwell's cold gaze followed her. "Even Oxford won't help, he's forgotten you." But Selene did not look back. She faced forward with unbreakable faith. Love and knowledge would lead her to the one she needed. And across the world, Cassian Vale, with a new face but an unchanged heart, still waited to hear her footsteps echo in his soul. Selene Ashford stepped through the grand stone gate of Oxford on a crisp early winter morning, mist still lingering in the air. Maple leaves carpeted the ancient stone path in gold and crimson. Clutching her small suitcase, her heart fluttered with excitement and nostalgia. A new world of vaulted arches and winding cloisters steeped in centuries of history lay before her. Her gaze settled on the faded banner proclaiming "Welcome, new students." Selene inhaled deeply, determined to let her anticipation drown out her fears of homesickness and scholarship pressure. In the freshman dormitory, she was assigned to a 4-person suite. Her 3 roommates greeted her with warm smiles and lilting English conversation. Though Selene's own English stumbled amid their lively chatter, they nodded and encouraged her kindly. As they discussed the university's book club, Selene quietly jotted notes in her notebook. This would be the place to find like minds, where the ache for Cassian might be soothed. That afternoon she wandered the Bodleian Library's towering shelves, the faint must of old pages reminding her of the first time she and Cassian had lost themselves among books. She chose a window seat overlooking the Bevington Quad, where students bustled below. Opening her laptop, she navigated to the blog Voices of Resilience that Cassian had started. The bold header "Finding Yourself Beyond the Face" appeared beside the author's silhouette looking toward London's skyline. Selene felt her heart sink. Was this a sign he still waited for her? An automatic reply popped up. "Thank you for subscribing. New posts every Friday." Selene's breath caught. It was Friday. She clicked latest post and saw a new entry titled "Homecoming of the Soul," published today. With trembling fingers she opened it and read his words on reclaiming identity while wandering Camden, on fleeing the past yet yearning to connect through his true voice. Each line washed over her, and tears blurred the screen. She typed in the comments box, "I'm here, waiting to find you." But her courage failed her and she stopped, afraid he might dismiss it as fan spam. That evening, Selene attended a gathering of the Vietnamese Society at Christ Church Cathedral. Golden lights illuminated the vaulted aisles in a scene worthy of a Gothic novel. Surrounded by fellow countrymen, her mind drifted to Cassian, his careful handling of her notebooks, the concern in his voice during her fright. She rose abruptly, telling friends she needed fresh air. Outside by a stone column, she wrapped her coat tighter and steeled herself to be brave. Meanwhile, 2 hours away in a Victorian room in London, Cassian Vale sat hunched at his desk. His surgically refined features gave him an elegant countenance, but his eyes still held the firmness of his soul. He had just posted a new blog entry and checked the responses, dozens of supportive comments, but one stood out: "If you're in Oxford, I'm near you." The message ended with an exclamation mark that startled him. He blinked at the screen, wondering if it was Selene. Then his messenger chimed. A strange username flashed, "Long time no see, V." He clicked and saw only 3 pulsing dots before the connection dropped. He frowned, uncertain if this was her or a prank. The next day Selene entered her first tutorial with a mix of excitement and nerves. Professor Hawthorne lectured on Nietzsche's notion of self-overcoming: "One must become who one is." The words rang through the hall and sent a chill down her spine. She looked up, scanning the rows of students for any sign of him, believing that somewhere among them, one person listened for her every echo. When the class ended, she spotted a poster announcing a seminar titled "Resilience and Rebirth" hosted by the Cultural Office, with speaker V, the celebrated blogger. Saliva dried in her mouth, her whole being tensed in anticipation. That seminar took place in a cozy lecture room lit by warm lamps, seats arranged in a gentle arc. Selene sat at the back, eyes fixed on the empty podium. Moments later a figure stepped into view: Cassian, his soft brown hair neatly trimmed, a bandage still hiding a scar at his temple. He surveyed the audience, lips curving in greeting. "Good afternoon. I'm V, and this is my journey." His voice rang out rich and sincere, each eye brimming with authenticity. Selene felt her heart constrict. She recognized that cadence, only he could inflect his words so. For nearly an hour he spoke on rebuilding identity after suffering, using his own story as example. Selene wept with each telling of facing the Vale family, of the anguish of losing one's own face, and of the resolve to reclaim one's inner voice. When he finished, the room fell silent for a moment before erupting in applause. Selene sat motionless, tears streaming down her cheeks, her faith renewed. This was him, though his face had changed, his voice was irreplaceable. As the audience began to disperse, Selene edged toward the exit, her heart pounding. Cassian descended the stage, gathering his notes. She pushed through the crowd until she stood just a step from him. His expression was focused and tired after his talk. Selene drew in a shaky breath and whispered, "Cassian?" He paused and looked up, eyes widening at her. Selene blinked fast, struggling for composure. I'm Selene." Time seemed to stop. Cassian turned quickly, his gaze locking with hers, an instant transcending years. Then confusion clouded his features. "I'm sorry, who are you?" he asked, uncertain. Selene closed her eyes, a tear tracing down her cheek. He took a step back as if she were a mirage. Selene forced a pained smile and placed a hand over her heart. I'm still me. Selene Ashford. She stepped away, leaving Cassian standing alone in the empty corridor, swept by a blend of doubt and a haunting sense of familiarity. Cassian Vale returned to his small Victorian apartment in London after the evening seminar, his mind a turmoil. Late at night, streetlights spilled through the tall window, tracing patterns across the desk piled with books and the laptop still open to his blog, Viva Voices of Resilience. He collapsed into his chair, still holding the wireless microphone he'd left the stage with. His own hoarse voice echoed in his head, and then, faintly, another sound, the name Selene, calling to him from some hidden place. He leaned back, blinking into the darkness, wondering if he'd imagined it. After the guests had departed, he'd scrolled through his blog's comments. Scores of praise, but one message had stayed with him: I'm here, waiting to find you. His hand trembled as he scrolled down to see who'd written it. A nameless account, no avatar, just the initials SA. He frowned and thought immediately of Selene Ashford, the girl he'd rescued from the inferno, the one who'd comforted him with her gratitude, who'd heard his whispered promise, you're not alone. His heart pounded, and a fierce intuition told him she sat behind that screen. He began to type into the reply box, who are you, but stopped and deleted it. How could he ask so bluntly online when reality itself felt so fractured? He lay back on his pillow, trying to quell his racing thoughts. Memories of Selene coursed through him like electricity, keeping sleep at bay. He rose and stepped onto the little balcony, drawing in the cold night air. Under the yellow glow, the ancient building looked almost magical, and he wondered if Selene in Oxford might be gazing at the same starry sky over 2 hours away. In his mind he wrestled, if he pulled her into this hazy search, would he be selfish? He had vowed to protect her, then fled, leaving her to ultimate suffering. A tear slid down his blistered cheek as he remembered his mother's words, Cassian, never forget the responsibilities of the heart. With a sigh, he re-entered the room and reopened his laptop, uncertain where to begin. In Oxford, Selene sat at her desk in the dormitory under the warm glow of her lamp, fatigue etched on her face. She had just returned from the grand seminar, her heart still racing from seeing Cassian on stage. Yet the memory of his blank confusion haunted her. She closed her book, steeling herself. She had to make him understand that she had been the one to hear his voice first, the only one who had connected with V online. She opened the comments again and typed, I'm SA, Selene Ashford. We met in the library, and again at the lecture. She paused a moment, then pressed send. Without waiting, she drafted a long email to the blog's contact address, recounting the details of that night in the fire, his words in the hospital, the tears on his face when he lost consciousness. She sent it in a burst of excitement and fear. Selene exhaled, then grabbed her coat and walked down the cold stone corridor, wondering, would Cassian read it? Would he remember her through these clumsy lines? She clutched her bag, battling a wave of helplessness. In the middle of the night, Cassian's computer dinged with a new email. He sat bolt upright, closed his eyes briefly, then opened it. The subject line read, from SA, Selene Ashford. His head spun. Hands trembling, he clicked it open and read each heartfelt line, memories of the fire, the burns on her home's walls, his own smoke-choked breaths. Each sentence felt like a needle to his heart, reminding him of the smoky scent of her hair as she lay unconscious on the stretcher. He closed his eyes, willing himself to look past his new face in the mirror and hear his own voice echoing in her words. Tears blurred his vision when he reached her final line, will you give me a chance to prove this love? In his mind he shouted, a chance? He'd lulled himself into forgetting, fled from the past. But now her plea shone like a guiding light. He reached for his phone and found the only number he still had for her, the one he used when he was bandaged. With shaking fingers he dialed, but the call failed, the number had changed. His chest tightened. Then he noticed her email signature, an Oxford address and dorm room. He decided he could wait no longer. The next morning, Selene woke with a faint smile. She had sent her letter, even knowing she might not hear back. She sat at her desk, preparing for class, when her phone rang. She nearly fell out of her chair. The screen displayed Cassian Vale. Hands trembling, she answered. His voice rang out, low and warm. "Selene? You're Selene Ashford?" Her heart exploded. Between sobs she could only whisper, Do you remember me?" Her pulse raced, and a natural smile spread across her face as she heard his reply, "You're not alone, right?" Across the silent line, those words, "You're not alone," resounded like hope, opening a new chapter in their journey of reunion and healing. After that brief call with Cassian, Selene Ashford felt her heart might burst with joy. She sat on the edge of her dorm bed as the morning sun streamed through the curtains, scattering diamonds of light across her blanket. She hadn't slept a moment, savoring every breath he took over the phone, every tremor in his voice as he spoke her name. Now she had to prepare quickly if she wanted more time to talk, aware that London was 3 hours behind and that Cassian might be busy with checkups and therapy. She opened her laptop and logged into the chat on V, Voices of Resilience, her heart pounding when she saw V was online. She typed, trembling, "I heard your voice. Are you okay?" After a long pause, the green cursor blinked as he replied, "I'm okay. How are you?" Selene typed back, "I'm fine. I've missed you so much." Simple words she'd rehearsed 1,000 times, yet now each keystroke felt labored, her heart brimmed with emotion. The messages flickered back and forth like waves across an ocean. Cassian answered, "I've missed you too, more than you know." In that brief line, Selene sensed his relief and worry. She typed again, "Have you contacted Crestmont Hospital? I want to come to London to see you." She hesitated over send, pulse pounding. Finally, the reply came, "I checked. You can visit. I'll be tied up with appointments, but I'm free Saturday afternoon." Selene smiled, eyes bright, "I'll sprint to the airport." All morning she felt as though she floated on clouds. She had her roommate call a taxi and book a round-trip flight to Heathrow, even instructing the driver to arrive extra early for the midday flight. Her anticipation surged, to see him again after all those months, to look into his eyes and hear his laugh in person. She vowed not to falter, to stay strong, though her hands still shook, haunted by the Blackwells and Damien, an undercurrent that threatened to pull her back. London greeted Selene with damp air and misty smoke. When the plane touched down, she inhaled the blend of jet fuel and fresh runway earth. She hurried through customs, claimed her bag, and flagged a taxi into the bustling city. The streets blurred past, colorful Shoreditch graffiti walls, the modern historic mix of East London, then the quieter rows of Victorian houses in South Kensington. When the taxi pulled up before Cassian's Victorian building, Selene closed her eyes and drew in a steadying breath. Her heart hammered as car horns sounded faintly down the street. Before her stood a cream-painted wooden door with the faded number 14B. She stepped from the cab, dragging her suitcase, her emotions a swirl of heaviness and excitement. Each footstep on the red-bricked pavement echoed like the world holding its breath. Selene rapped softly on the door. In an instant her breath caught as she heard footsteps inside. The door creaked open, and there stood Cassian, soft brown hair falling over his bandaged forehead, the plaster concealing much of his face, yet his eyes held that familiar mixture of calm and emotion. He stared at her, then offered the slightest, hushed smile, "Selene." His voice, husky and uncertain, carried all the weight of their shared past. Selene blinked back tears, feeling everything still froze around them. City noises, London's mist, all dissolving until only they remained. She stepped forward and took in his bandaged features, a new scar at his temple, skin taut and swollen, a fresher brightness to his face but still marked by history. Overcome, she flung her arms around him, tears pouring freely. Cassian froze for a moment, then wrapped his arms around her waist, holding her as though afraid she might shatter. "You really came," he whispered. Selene nodded, pressing into his chest. "I've missed you, so much." The cramped hallway suddenly felt warm as two lost souls found each other again. Cassian gently wiped her tears, his nose twitched in the cold air. "You look well," he murmured. Selene lifted her head to meet his eyes, gratitude shining through. "I'm well, because you're here." For the first time, neither needed flowery words, simply each other's presence was enough. He led her inside the apartment, cluttered with books and a laptop left open. He set her suitcase by the bed and offered her a glass of fresh orange juice. She took a sip and felt the cool sweetness spread through her. She glanced at the mirror on the opposite wall, reflecting their images: a girl with long chestnut hair and reddened eyes, a boy with his face wrapped in bandages, eyes filled with warmth. She smiled and thought, this really is a new beginning. Over a light supper of sandwiches and tomato soup that Cassian had made himself, they sat facing each other on the rug before a small electric fireplace. The logs crackled, and the scent of burning wood evoked a rare peace. Cassian removed his bandages and placed them on the table, revealing raw, reddened skin and healing scars. Selene reached out, her eyes soft. "Does it hurt?" Cassian drew a quiet breath. "It does, but not more than the pain of thinking you were gone forever." Selene's heart ached. She gently traced the scars on his forearm, revealing faint lines on her own wrist, reminders of her own moments of despair. "I'm so sorry for everything you endured." Cassian brushed her sleeve aside to reveal her healed scars. "I don't regret it," he whispered. "Because you taught me what courage truly means." In that peaceful moment, they understood, they were not only lovers, but companions on a journey of rebirth. Selene leaned against Cassian's shoulder and spoke softly, "Will you come to Vietnam with me? I want you to meet my friends, to stand beside me when I defend my thesis." Cassian squeezed her hand, hope shining in his eyes. "I will. Wherever you need me." Tears welled in Selene's eyes as she pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Thank you." As night deepened, Selene lay in the small corner bed, clutching a spare bandage, her thoughts on the road ahead. She had overcome the Blackwells, defied prejudice, even cheated death to find both love and strength. In the chair by the window, Cassian wrote in his journal, "Selene Ashford, she has given me a second chance." Ink blurred at the margins, a sign of a brilliant new dawn. They had walked through darkness together. Now, hand in hand, they knew that no matter the storms ahead, love and knowledge would always guide them home. Morning sunlight filtered through the lone, sheer curtain, casting pale bands of light across the thick wool rug. Selene Ashford blinked awake, feeling the warmth of the blanket tucked around her hips and the even breathing of Cassian sleeping beside her. She sat up very quietly, slipped her heels onto the cool wooden floor, and tiptoed to the window. Outside, the tiny courtyard was full of climbing roses, their leaves still beaded with dewy crystals. Selene closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, steadying herself for the day ahead. Today she would face the Blackwells once more, this time to finalize her paperwork for the trip back to Vietnam. In the kitchen, Cassian wrapped a scarf around his neck to conceal the scar there, holding a mug of strong black coffee. He stood with his back to the door, gazing out at the balcony where roses were shyly unfurling their blooms. With a soft click, Selene opened the door and called, "You're up?" Cassian turned, a gentle smile curving through the scar on his cheek. "Have you mapped out our itinerary yet?" he asked. Selene nodded, her voice warm and steady. "I'm going home to handle my short-term study permit. I want you by my side." Cassian set down his mug, came to her, and slipped an arm around her waist. "I'll go anywhere you need me." Selene sniffled, leaning her head against his chest. "Thank you." Their journey to Hanoi came amid a crisp autumn day, the airport alive with the scent of fallen leaves and a clear blue sky. Walking among crowded travelers, the overhead announcements beating like drumrolls, Selene gripped Cassian's hand, her heart racing with nerves. Soon she would face her stepfather, Serafina, and Thaddeus. She did not know how they would react to seeing her escorted by the bandaged young man, the living symbol of her resolve and their undying love. Arriving at the Blackwell mansion, Selene hesitated before the rusty iron gate. Damien Blackwell stood there in a black blazer, his gaze as cold as ice. Serafina and Thaddeus flanked him, faces registering surprise and curiosity. Selene took a deep breath and stepped onto the front walk, her shoulders trembling. As she pulled her suitcase up the steps, Damien's voice cut through the hush. "Selene Ashford, what brings you home?" Selene squared her shoulders and replied crisply, "I'm here to finalize paperwork, and to introduce my boyfriend, Cassian Vale." With that, she stepped aside and took Cassian's hand, a small gesture but a declaration, "He is my other half." Serafina's eyes flashed, and for a heartbeat she seemed about to lash out, but then she let a mocking smile spread. "Boyfriend? You must be mistaken." Thaddeus guffawed, while Damien frowned. "Vale? The man she almost died saving?" His tone was that of a cold judge. Cassian pressed his lips together, refusing to be provoked. He squeezed Selene's hand and faced the Blackwells. "I'm here out of duty and love. If you have a problem with that, I'm ready to explain myself to anyone." His voice was calm yet resolute, his bandaged face radiant with unbreakable spirit. Tension thickened the air. Serafina sneered, "So you just waltz right in, Mr. Vale? No concern for family honor?" Selene met her stepsister's glare steadily. "Serafina, all I want is for our family to understand that I'm happy. Cassian may not come from your world, but he belongs to mine." Her words struck like arrows, piercing the doubt in every mind. Damien was silent for a long moment, then snapped his fingers. "Very well. If Mr. Vale is sincere, he may enter." He turned away and rolled up his sleeve to adjust his watch. The door swung open, welcoming Selene and Cassian, at least, no longer as intruders. Inside the grand living room, a dark wood table sat atop a crimson rug. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Damien gestured for Selene to sit on a sofa by the window and indicated a chair for Cassian a few paces away, their every move seemingly on display. Silence reigned, broken only by the tick of a grandfather clock. Selene placed her hand lightly on Cassian's and squeezed. "I'm okay." He nodded. Suddenly Serafina stood and pulled out her phone, displaying an old photo of Selene from high school, scarred from past bullying. The caption read, "She dares to show that fragile face?" Serafina's smile was storm-dark. But Selene met her gaze calmly and sat up straighter. "That was my past," she said softly, without anger. "I'm not ashamed. I overcame it to succeed today." Her eyes blazed with self-respect. Cassian, seated beside her, gave her shoulder an encouraging squeeze. Damien's brow darkened. "You live in arrogance, using it against me?" Selene looked at him kindly but firmly. "I'm not arrogant. I simply know my own worth. And I want all of you to understand that I deserve happiness." The room fell utterly still. Serafina glowered, Thaddeus muttered under his breath. Damien waved a hand. "Enough. You want something, Selene?" Selene smiled gently. "I want to introduce Cassian as my boyfriend. I hope you'll value him as he valued me, just as I treasure him every day." After a moment's pause, Damien let out a single, decisive "very well." His words sealed their acceptance. The Blackwell family acknowledges Cassian Vale. A warm breeze seemed to fill the room as Selene beamed. Cassian clasped her hand and smiled with gratitude and love. Serafina lowered her phone, displaying a smiling snap of the two, and offered a sardonic, "It seems you've won." Thaddeus scoffed, "She was always last, how does she land a boyfriend?" But Selene refused to let their bitterness dim her joy. She inclined her head, eyes bright. "I learnt from Mrs. Stanton that freedom is the only desire no one can take away." Her words rang clear in the hush, affirming her right to live freely. As the sun set and golden lamplight flickered across the living room walls, Selene and Cassian left the Blackwell mansion hand in hand. Behind them, each Blackwell family member stood changed, if only a little. Selene straightened her shoulders, inhaled deeply, and thought, "The battle with the past is over." Cassian squeezed her hand and whispered, "And our new journey begins." In the chill of the autumn night, two steadfast hearts strode forward, believing that no storm could break them so long as love and learning served as their guiding beacons. The next morning, Selene Ashford awoke in the Blackwell mansion with a feeling both strange and familiar. Autumn sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating a hand-woven lotus-patterned rug, its colors faded with time. She sat on the edge of the bed and gazed at her mother's journal pages left on the nightstand, the graceful script tilting in a whisper, "My daughter, chase your passion and never lose yourself." Selene smiled as her fingers traced the words, drawing strength from memory and steeling her resolve for the road ahead. Cassian Vale entered, draping on his black leather jacket. His bandages had been partially removed, revealing a sturdier jawline beneath. He paused at the doorway, eyes soft. "You're up?" he asked, his voice calm yet tender. Selene rose and slipped an arm around his waist. "I'm fine, just a bit nostalgic." Her heart still fluttered at the thought of his protective gaze last night, when he had shielded her from Seraphina's sneers and Damien's cold stare. Together they stepped into the front courtyard, where baskets of purple bougainvillea bowed in the crisp breeze. Cassian bent down and plucked a small daisy, handing it to Selene. "For you, a keepsake." Selene gently caressed the delicate petals and offered him a shy smile. "Thank you." The moment stretched between them like a warm refuge, just the two of them, surrounded by pale sunshine. She told herself, no matter the storms they'd weathered, there were always fragile blossoms waiting for care. At noon Selene took Cassian to her childhood faux stall at the street corner, a place steeped in memory. The rich aroma of simmering broth, the sweet tang of ginger, and the freshness of herbs made her heart ache with nostalgia. She savored each spoonful, recounting afternoons with her mother listening to the vendors' stories. Cassian listened intently, a bowl poised in midair, then grinned, "This place has soul unlike any I've known." Selene laughed, her heart swelling, he had touched her most sacred memories. That afternoon they tackled Selene's paperwork for her return to Oxford. At Damien's oak desk they sat across from her stepfather, surrounded by stacks of translation contracts, visa extension forms, and university letters. Selene faced him earnestly. Damien regarded them both for a moment, then nodded. "I'll sign. But remember, no personal distractions from your studies." Selene bowed her head. "I promise." Cassian presented her official Oxford welcome letter confirming her next term's dates. Damien signed the final page with firm strokes. "Once you complete your program, everything will go smoothly." Selene's eyes glistened as she bowed again. "Thank you, sir." In her heart she knew, not only had her family accepted her, they were now supporting her dream, hand in hand with the man she loved. That evening, Selene and Cassian strolled Hanoi's old quarter. Lanterns glowed from shopfronts, vendors called out softly. The night air was cool, they shared a single scarf around their shoulders. Selene perched on a plastic stool by the curb, waiting for a rickshaw to carry them through winding lanes. Seated behind him, she leaned into Cassian's back, breathing in the scent of fuel and blooming gardenias. The amber light danced on ancient red bricks, conjuring a scene both romantic and nostalgic. She described each alley and every roadside tea stall where she and friends had laughed through high school. Cassian chuckled, eyes shining with delight. "I see another world when I look at you." They paused at Honkeem Lake, settling on the stone steps by the water's edge. The glassy surface mirrored Turtle Tower glowing in the night. Selene held his hand and gazed at the reflected lights. "Do you know why I love Oxford?" she asked. Cassian shook his head, his voice soft. "For its knowledge? Because that's where our story began?" Selene smiled gently, "Both. But Oxford also taught me to become myself, to overcome fear and to connect with you." Cassian squeezed her hand, "And I'm grateful to be part of that journey." Selene looked up, her eyes alight with determination. "Let's write new chapters together, shall we?" The next morning, Selene boarded her flight back to London and then on to Oxford to prepare for the new term. Cassian saw her off outside the Neubai terminal, suitcase in hand, his eyes shadowed with longing. As departure announcements echoed, Selene embraced him tightly. "You'll keep the blog mailbox open for me?" she asked. Cassian nodded. "I'll wait for you every day." Selene smiled. "I won't keep you waiting long." She stood on tiptoe and brushed a kiss across his collarbone. Then she turned and passed through security. Cassian watched her go, a mix of homesickness and trust swelling in his chest. She would return. Back at Oxford, the new semester began with intensive seminars and final essays. Selene returned to the Bodleian with a steadier spirit than ever. She poured care into every line of her paper on the process of personal rebirth, drawing inspiration from her and Cassian's journey. Meanwhile in London, Cassian continued his treatments, wrote new blog posts, and prepared for an upcoming talk titled Love and Knowledge, When Heart and Mind Walk Together. He recalled Selene's words, "Knowledge matters only if it brings happiness to ourselves and those we love." He pinned that quote at the top of his notes, making it the centerpiece of his speech. At term's end, Selene was invited to present at an international seminar in New York, a major opportunity and challenge, to speak before professors and students from around the globe. Nervously, she phoned Cassian. "I'm so anxious." Her voice trembled. Cassian's reply was gentle, "I believe in you. You're ready." Selene let out a small laugh. "I'll do well, because I remember, you're not alone." Cassian drew in a deep breath. "I'm here, at every turn of your journey." Selene choked back tears. "Thank you." Across the miles, their hearts and minds connected once again. Thus the vast distances between Oxford in New York and London were bridged by an invisible thread of love and ambition. Stepping onto the podium, Selene raised her voice over the hushed auditorium. "The journey of rebirth is not merely a solo endeavor, but a shared act of caring and support from those who walk beside us." Under the stage lights, she imagined Cassian listening, eyes fixed on her every gesture. She smiled with confidence, sensing the unseen power of their love stretching beyond space and time. When the seminar closed to thunderous applause, Selene swept her gaze across the audience, her heart lifted by a hopeful refrain. Far from home, amid countless challenges, she knew she would never be alone. Wherever love and knowledge walk hand in hand, their humanity finds the infinite strength to keep writing its most brilliant chapters. Selene Ashford sat alone in her Manhattan hotel suite, watching New York's streetlights sparkle through the high windows. She had just finished her seminar, yet the applause of hundreds of students and international faculty still echoed in her mind. She inhaled deeply, the scent of sticky notes and strong coffee mingling with a faint trace of perfume in the air. Pride and nerves fluttered in her chest. Tomorrow, when Cassian appeared and stepped out into the bustling street to meet her, would their love and knowledge be strong enough to conquer the distance? Her phone rang. The screen read Cassian Vale. Selene smiled and answered. His warm, resonant voice came through. "Selene, I'm outside the hotel entrance. Can you come down?" Her heart pounded like it did when she was the shy schoolgirl trembling at her desk. She snapped her notebook shut, flicked the skirt of her dress into place, and descended the wooden stairs, finding him standing beneath the golden lamps, his black leather jacket still carrying the scent of Earl Grey tea. He watched her every step, and for the first time since the fire, she saw a full smile on his bandaged face. They wrapped each other in an embrace on the chilly pavement. Cassian murmured in her ear, "You shone, even with me not there." Selene rested her head on his shoulder, feeling warmth through his heavy coat. She looked up into his deep brown eyes. "You're always in my heart." He smiled and drew from his pocket a small, dark blue leather box. Selene's breath caught. When he opened it, a silver ring embossed with Nordic philosophical motifs gleamed inside. Cassian knelt on the sidewalk beside the faint smoke drifting from an incense burner at the curb. He took Selene's hand, voice trembling. "Selene Ashford, will you continue writing our life story with me? Will you be my partner forever?" Tears streamed down Selene's cheeks as she nodded and choked out, "Yes, my love." Cassian slid the ring onto her ring finger. Its warmth was an eternal promise. They sealed their vow with a sweet kiss amid the city that never sleeps, immortalizing the moment when love and knowledge entwined. The next day they wandered through Central Park. Red maples had carpeted the paths, and sunlight filtered gently through the tall trees. Hand in hand, they strolled along the lake's edge, listening to the water's soft lapping and sparrows chattering in the autumn garden. Selene leaned against Cassian's shoulder, feeling his strength and freedom. She spoke of her early, difficult days at Crestmont, her fears, her loneliness. He listened with thoughtful, compassionate eyes. Finally, he whispered, "Because of you, I learned the meaning of home, where the heart is at peace." That evening, Selene took Cassian to a small farewell party with her literature department friends. Laughter echoed, and glasses clinked under flickering candlelight. She introduced him as the incredible companion who has given me a universe of knowledge and love. Warm smiles greeted the proud couple. Selene realized she was more than Selene Ashford, top scholar. She was a confident woman, free and secure beside the man she loved. Back at the hotel later, Cassian opened a world map on his phone and tapped city names: London, Oxford, Hanoi, New York. "Where shall we mark our feet next?" he asked. Selene laughed and pressed her finger to a tiny drawn heart. "Anywhere love and knowledge live. I want you by my side." Cassian drew her close, vowing, "I'll go with you to the ends of the earth." On their last night of the trip, they sat together at a shared work desk with notebooks and laptops open. Together they drafted the next chapter for Voices of Resilience, the story of their journey from a small village by the Red River to prestigious universities, of fire and scars, and above all, of an undying love between two souls hungry for knowledge. Each line, each idea flowed from their joined hands, a testament to their vow: though faces and places may change, our hearts and minds remain forever allied. Their final post before leaving New York was titled "Home is Where Our Minds Meet." They published it at midnight, then fell asleep in the glowing city of a million lights. And so, 15 chapters of sleepless nights, steadfast perseverance, trials by fire and prejudice, came to a close with a promise: to journey onward together, nurturing love and learning, so they would never be alone again. Selene Ashford awoke in her Oxford dormitory on a bitter winter morning. Outside the window, snow drifted softly, blanketing the ancient stone courtyard in pristine white. She wrapped herself in a warm coat and settled by the window with a steaming cup of ginger tea, her heart brimming with emotion. The recent trip to New York had awakened in her a greater yearning, not just for knowledge, but to share and spread the good she had found with Cassian. She recalled her final semester presentation, the audience's rapt attention, and felt her confidence glow anew. Now she prepared for her thesis defense on the healing power of knowledge and love. She knew this journey was not hers alone but for all who had felt alone and wounded. Next door, Cassian Vale was finalizing slides for his Paris talk, Love and Reason, under the banner Bridging Hearts and Minds. His London study was quiet except for the steady tap of keys and the occasional crackle of the heater. A Singapore passport lay open on the desk, proof that he'd secured visas for his European lectures. At every stop, he spoke of Selene as his boundless inspiration. Yet beneath his decisive exterior, he sometimes feared that his still banded face might prevent audiences from seeing the real man within. The following morning, they met outside the Bodleian Library. Selene showed Cassian her thesis draft, each page adorned with images of their journey: rescue flames, world maps, street-side smiles under Hanoi lanterns. He read and exclaimed, "You've woven an epic love story in words." She smiled proudly, "All thanks to you, and the love that inspired me." Cassian laid a hand on her shoulder. "Together, we'll share that power." A week later, Selene stood before her defense committee in elegant attire. Professors from Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard filled the pews. In the front row, Cassian watched with warm pride. When she began, the voice clear and assured, eyes shining, the hall fell into a hush. She illustrated her points with photos and excerpts from Voices of Resilience. At her close, she inhaled deeply and declared, "Knowledge is mere shell, love is the soul. The auditorium erupted into acclaim. Afterward, Cassian enveloped her in a proud hug. You did it. Selene's radiant smile and misty eyes answered, I couldn't have, without you. Outside, snowflakes drifted down as if nature itself celebrated their triumph. 3 days later, the pair departed for Paris for Cassian's seminar. Under the twinkling Eiffel Tower, they arrived at the Maison de la Poésie, the queue winding long with eager attendees clutching tickets stamped bridging hearts and minds. Selene wore a red wool cloak, Cassian a sharp black suit and the commemorative watch they'd chosen before Hanoi. They mounted the stage together, exchanging a look of mutual trust. Their 2-hour presentation ignited lively Q&A. Though the audience spoke many languages, when Selene switched to Vietnamese to recount their fire rescue, the hall fell silent before bursting into applause. Cassian interpreted, eyes shining with pride. They shared, when heart and mind align, we build enduring values. That final Paris night, they strolled along the glittering Seine on the Alexander III Bridge, she leaning on him as they whispered, there will be many more chapters. He kissed her hair, every day with you is a new beginning. After Paris they accepted invitations in Tokyo and Berlin, then Cape Town, each new land touching souls eager for wisdom and love. In Tokyo, Selene wrote a regular column for global learning in English and Japanese. In Berlin, Cassian led presentation workshops for engineering students, inspiring them to speak from the heart. Everywhere they went, they added vibrant strokes to the map of their voyage. 3 months later, they returned to Hanoi, where it all began. Selene took up her post as visiting lecturer at the Educational Technology Institute in a warm, intimate ceremony. Cassian, as guest speaker, stood by her side as she swore the oath, I, Selene Ashford, pledged to use knowledge and love to inspire Vietnam's youth. Applause thundered, hearts full of joy. That evening, at a garden reception at Selene's family home, Serafina and Thaddeus appeared with genuine smiles. Sister Selene, you have shown great courage, they offered. Selene returned their embrace, thank you, I'm glad to share this success with family. Damien nodded, pride glinting in his eyes, I knew you would do well. In that moment of warm reunion, Selene looked to Cassian, gratitude sparkling, see? It was all worth it. As night fell, they walked along Hon Keem Lake under dim lantern light. Selene looped her arm through Cassian's, no matter life's storms, you are my anchor. Cassian bent to kiss her forehead, and you are my endless inspiration. Across the still water, Turtle Tower stood witness to their union of love and knowledge, 2 kindred spirits ready to pen the final, most fulfilling chapter of their lives. Early dawn light filtered through the lone curtain, scattering soft rays over the dew-speckled climbing roses at the Ashford Blackwell estate gate like glittering jewels. Selene Ashford awoke to a faint sweetness drifting in from the bridal suite window. She slipped from beneath the coverlet and looked across at Cassian Vale, still deep in slumber. Morning rays painted warm streaks across his sun-kissed skin through the fabric drapes. Selene's heart fluttered. Today they would exchange their vows and officially begin their life together. Cassian opened his eyes to see Selene watching him with a tender smile. Together they rose, their gazes lingering as if to savor the long days apart. Selene reached out to brush her fingertips across the faint scar on his collarbone and whispered, I love you more than my very life. Cassian bowed his head and kissed her shoulder, and I vow to protect you all my days. Silence reigned among the rose thickets, save for morning birdsong heralding a bright new beginning. In the courtyard, a simple arbor of pristine white flowers, baby's breath, jasmine, and eucalyptus framed the aisle. Friends and family formed 2 lines, faces glowing with joy. Selene wore a soft ivory silk gown with a sweetheart neckline and carried a small bouquet. She glided down the path, her low chignon adorned with sprigs of baby's breath, her delicate features alight with happiness. At the altar, Cassian waited in a classic black tuxedo, a crisp white shirt, and a dove-gray tie. His eyes followed Selene's every step, his heart hammering in his chest. When she reached him, the world seemed to vanish. He held out his hand, she slipped hers into his, and they shared an unspoken gaze. All else fell silent but their joined pulses. The Crestmont Academy headmaster, honored guest, began the ceremony with a simple blessing. Love and knowledge have brought you together today. May you nurture both and keep your passions ever bright. Then Cassian and Selene spoke their vows as one. I pledge to stand by you, to cherish your dreams and your soul. I pledge my heart and my mind eternally to you. Applause swelled like waves upon the shore, bearing witness to their steadfast promise. Afterward, guests enjoyed afternoon tea beneath the flamboyant gold rain trees. A 3-tiered white cake spiced with vanilla awaited. Selene and Cassian invited Damien, Serafina, and Thaddeus to join them for celebratory toasts. Warm smiles replaced old suspicion, and heartfelt handshakes sealed the healing of family bonds. As the sun sank, the couple strolled to the small garden pond, breeze lifting Selene's hair. She rested her head on Cassian's shoulder, gazing at the twilight sky. She spoke of her dream to establish a free learning center for orphans, combining philosophy and life skills. He smiled. I will be your partner, making that dream real. She turned to him, eyes shining. Not just the dream, you are my steadfast home. That night they danced beneath twinkling lights to Claire de Lune, her arms around his neck, their feet gliding across the white runner. Each turn, each glance, was etched with joy. Their scars and storms had become unbreakable memories, empowering their love. At the close of the celebration, Selene and Cassian released sky lanterns, wishing for enduring bonds and the spread of knowledge. The lanterns rose into the starry night like their dreams ascending to touch other hearts. Hand in hand, Selene whispered, "This chapter ends, but so many more await." Cassian replied softly, "And no matter what comes, love and reason will light our way." From the flames and smoke of that long-ago night, through hesitant academic doors, through reunion and separation, all led Selene and Cassian to this perfect moment. Beneath the canopy of stars, they stepped forward to write the next chapters of their shared journey, no longer alone, but beating together in unwavering harmony. In the first spring breeze, the pink blossoms of not-tan plum trees adorned the courtyard of the Ashford, Blackwell villa. Selene and Cassian stood before the nameplate of Light of Wisdom, the center they had dreamed up to help orphans and wounded souls discover the power of knowledge and love. A carved wooden sign bore the elegant script beside a thriving rose arbor. Hand in hand, they gazed toward the future with radiant hope. Selene gently rolled up her sleeve and smiled. "I still remember our first encounter at Crestmont, when you protected me from Serafina and Thaddeus's bullying." Cassian nodded, his eyes warm. "And you taught me to stand and protect rather than run away." Now they returned to the very place where it all began, but not to look back, but to plant new seeds of hope. Inside, the inaugural classroom was set up with child-sized desks, a whiteboard, and shelves packed with books. Soft daylight filtered through pastel glass windows onto the cozy space. Selene directed volunteers as they helped children look up words in a bilingual Vietnamese-English dictionary, instilling delight at discovering language's power. Laughter and curious voices mingled. "Miss, why is hope so important?" She knelt by a wide-eyed child and answered gently, "Because hope is the lamp that guides us through darkness." In another corner, Cassian and a team of volunteers led an emotional expression workshop. He asked, "When you feel pain, what do you feel?" Small voices answered in turn, "Sadness, fear, loneliness." Cassian offered a warm smile, "Turn those feelings into a story, draw them on paper, or sing them in a song. When you share them, your pain is understood, and your heart grows lighter." The children's eyes brightened as they absorbed his reassurance. Between sessions, Selene and Cassian exchanged swift plans. "We should add a critical thinking class, and a creative writing workshop would really help." Their ideas blossomed without end, proof that their love and vision would extend far beyond this one center into the wider community. Each concept they jotted into their notebook, soon to become the first issue of Light of Wisdom Quarterly, published biannually to chronicle the center's journey and its stories of renewal. As afternoon waned, Selene and Cassian strolled around the flagstone path beside West Lake. Nearby, willows draped their branches into the still water. Selene gazed across the lake and sighed with joy. We have come so far from that sea of flames. Cassian squeezed her hand, and from now on, whatever storms arise, we will face them together. Selene smiled and pressed her hand to her heart. I am no longer alone. He replied softly, neither am I. As dusk fell, they returned to the villa. Along the hallway hung 3 framed photographs: the black and white shot of their first meeting at the Crestmont Library, the vibrant lantern launch in New York, and the latest of Selene's inauguration as lecturer. They formed a timeline, a testament to dreams and love flowing endlessly onward. That evening, they and their volunteers held a small grand opening ceremony under the night sky. A boy orphan sang Heal the World to gentle guitar accompaniment. Selene and Cassian stood behind the wings, hands entwined, tears of joy shining. They knew that their years of effort, their shared hopes, had become reality. Finally, Selene and Cassian climbed to the villa's rooftop. The city lay below in a sea of twinkling lights. Together they gazed at the stars, hearts certain, though their journey began in solitude and pain, it had blossomed into a shared adventure of offering hope and knowledge to others. Love, like a river, would flow on, merging with the endless stream of wisdom, to spark countless lives with its guiding light. For them, this was only the opening chapter of love and reason, a journey without end.